Hi folks, Andy Fionn, Rambles with Robin and Ruby here. In this video, we welcome the arrival of our two grandsons, Brayden and Adrien, to Yukon. I formally introduce you to Brayden and to Adrien. In summer of 2023, they joined us in Whitehorse, Yukon on July 9. Libby and I had left Ottawa back on May 14 and after 17 days, arrived for our fourth visit to Yukon. The arrival of the boys marked the beginning of a very different and delightful journey with them to Tuktoyaktuk on the Arctic Ocean, Northwest Territories, followed by a long drive back across a lot of Canada to Ottawa, Ontario. Join us as we enjoy some of the highlights of the Whitehorse area during the first week in Yukon, including a fishing day on Marsh Lake, a hike to the summit of Grey Mountain, and a visit to Yukon Beringia Interpretive Centre, followed by the drive along the Klondike Highway to Dawson City. Enjoy! The boys' travel began in the airport in Ottawa, where they boarded an Air North 737 jet and flew as unaccompanied minors from Ottawa to Yellowknife and then to Whitehorse, Yukon. Meanwhile, in Whitehorse, we were up early as we waited somewhat anxiously for their arrival. I would be lying if I said we weren't a little worried. After all, it was their first big trip outside of Ottawa, alone, and their first plane flight. The jet arrived safely on a very hot Yukon afternoon. And a big note of appreciation to Air North, Yukon's airline, for looking after the boys as unaccompanied minors. After the formal procedure to hand off the unaccompanied minors to their caregivers, that is, we the grandparents, the boys called home to reassure their parents that all was well and describe their flight experience. We then headed to our campsite, where we set up the ground tent and the car top tent for the boys. And that marked the beginning of a 6-week adventure. Day 2 began with a hearty breakfast, followed by preparation for our hike to the summit of Grey Mountain. We were joined by Brian Dunn, wearing the yellow shirt. We had met Brian in the campground. He was from Ireland, and he accompanied us on the Grey Mountain hike. There is a rough road on the side of Grey Mountain that is vehicle-friendly for about 3/4 of the way to some communication towers and the trailhead. We drove most of the way and then hiked along the road to the trailhead itself. We stopped along the road to give Brayden, Adrien, and Brian some training on the use of bear spray, which we carried all the time. We were in bear country after all. The main trick we learned is to stand upwind when testing. There was a lot of forest fire smoke that morning because of a forest fire located to the west of Whitehorse. But other than that, the hike was lovely. So we're kind of at the top of Grey Mountain, and we're just heading back to start our descent. All right, it is July the 10th. Adrien, what was your highlight and low light of the day?
Highlight is probably going to the top of Grey Mountain, and the low light probably how cold it was on the top of Grey Mountain.
Very interesting. Okay, Brayden, what was your highlight and low light of today?
The highlight was probably going to the summit of Grey Mountain, because I went straight to the summit, the highest point, and the low light was probably how hot it was going up Grey Mountain.
On day 3, July 11, 2023, we spent half a day fishing for lake trout on Marsh Lake, located about 45 kilometers or 30 miles southeast of Whitehorse. 3 fish were caught. We lost 1, landed 2, Brayden released his fish, and we kept Adrien's fish to eat for dinner. No doubt it was a cold day on the water of Marsh Lake.
The ones you get a chance. Oh, yes. There he is. Oh. What? Oh, unlucky.
tip up. Ready to go. You know, I wonder whether I actually was taking a video or not. Sorry, we have to do this all over again. Yeah, no. Today is July 11th and it is Wednesday. Brayden, what was your highlight and low light of the day?
I think the highlight of today was fishing, because I basically caught 2 fish. Only one made it into the boat, but I caught 2 fish. And the low light was probably, it was extremely cold today, like very cold today. I wore my jacket all day today.
And Adrien, your highlight and low light of the fishing day?
Highlight was probably eating the fish that I caught. I've never done that before. And the low light, probably the same thing with Brayden on how cold it was on the boat.
Because that water's cold in Yukon. And just for the record, in case people are wondering, it was nice to eat the fish you caught. Next time, you can both cook and eat. Is that right? The fish that you caught. For both of you, is that right, Brayden? You could cook and eat the fish that you catch? Excellent. Thank you both. On day 4, July 12, 2023, we drove along the Klondike Highway from Whitehorse to Minto Resort Campground, located about halfway to Dawson City. The Klondike Highway links Whitehorse with Dawson City. We stopped for lunch at the famous Brayburn Lodge, known for its rather large cinnamon buns and wholesome homemade meals. Sadly, I did not photograph the cinnamon bun, but I'm guessing it was about 12 inches across from corner to corner. Like the buns, the sandwiches were large and made from local meat and bread, and they were delicious. That night, we stopped at the historic Minto Resort, one of our favorite places to camp along the Klondike Highway. The resort was built by Pat and Geraldine Van Bibber and is operated by the Selkirk First Nation. Pat, as former chief of Selkirk First Nation, played an important role in negotiating with the federal government and the signing of the Selkirk First Nation Self-Government Agreement on July 21, 1997. Geraldine is a member of the Gwich'in First Nation, was a former commissioner of Yukon, and at the time of this video, summer 2023, is a member of Yukon Legislative Assembly. There's a lot more to this story of the serendipitous meeting with Pat and Geraldine Van Bibber, but I'll leave that for a future video. In summer of 2023, the oversight of the Minto Resort was under the capable hands of Darcy Ramsey, whose First Nation roots extend back to Manitoba, and Darcy's partner, Diane Johnny, of Carmacks First Nation. Diane was the head cook, serving tourists who arrived daily on tour buses that stop at the resort for a homemade lunch and a spectacular view of the Yukon River. Everybody seems to want their own table, so I guess that's a sign that we've been traveling all day together in the car and we want our own table, but it is a spectacular view. So it is Wednesday, July 12th, and we are at Minto Resort on the Yukon River. We've just arrived and we've had a discussion with the staff here at Minto Resort. And we have a lovely drink of lemonade that was prepared by Michaela. And in return for all the offerings that Darcy has extended to us to stay here. We are going to, the boys have decided, after discussion, no coercion. They've decided of their own free will that half of the Brayburn cinnamon bun they will offer it to the staff here at Minto Resort, and we have half of a lake trout. We ate half last night, but Adrien caught the lake trout. We ate half last night. We will offer that second half to the staff here at Minto Resort as a gesture of our thankfulness for they allowing us safe entry through their traditional homeland, and the help that they've given us so far here at Minto Resorts. So Brayden's going to cut is Brayden going to cut that? Mm-hmm. You can cut it. You might want to take the wrap off? Yeah, I would take the wrap off, yeah.
There was construction at the resort in 2023, so if you plan to camp there, stop in to see how the construction has progressed.
So we're having dinner outside the Minto Landing Resort, and tonight was, as we were told, using their description, Indian taco night. There's Granddad's plate. Pretty good. There's Brayden and Adrien's plate. Pretty good. And it was kind of like dessert, because it was dinner on top of dinner. Sun's looking a bit red. So we're walking down the historic Whitehorse to Dawson wagon road. A little bit of history of this that I'll add, but Brayden's up there following the tracks of many of the early settlers to this part of Yukon, and particularly headed to Dawson City. We're here at Minto Landing, and it's interesting. There's a sign which I'll give you a view of. It's very hard to read the writing, but it gives you some information about the Yukon River peregrine falcons. And essentially the sign says, from here into Alaska, those riverbanks along the Yukon River are an important nesting place of the interior peregrine falcon, which I believe is protected, and they're of course encouraging you not to climb the cliffs or to camp in this immediate area, because they are a threatened species or subspecies. So it's just another piece of ecological insight to the Yukon River. Also at Minto Landing is one of these historic roadhouses. It's a log cabin. They were spaced, I understand, about every 20 miles along the, oops, so that was a ground squirrel warning us to stay away. The roadhouses were stationed or created about every 20 miles between Whitehorse and Dawson City, and they provided lodging, horse changes for the wagon trains, for the wagons themselves. There are a number of reports and stories of people who traveled on these, and I think it's safe to say that it was an exciting wagon ride at the very least. Oops, there goes a little bird. So this is one of the few that remain. Just walk around the other side and get a different view of it. And I think that's a white-crowned sparrow. I'm going to shut this off, take a picture. So we're at the Minto Landing Aerodrome, which doesn't look like it gets much use. I see some fuel drums there. So it is Wednesday, July 12th, and we're at Minto Landing. Actually, we're at Minto Resort, overlooking the Yukon River. We are expecting rain tonight. The sun has kind of a weird look about it. But what we're going to do after our day of travel is we're going to get our highlights and our lowlights of today.
So the highlight for today is probably the sleep that I got in the car drive over here. I had a very long nap. And the low light, probably how long the actual drive was, and there was a bunch of bumps.
I think the highlight of today was probably going to Brayden Lodge. Cinnamon buns over there were nice, and the lodge itself was nice. We had a nice lunch over there. I think the low light would probably be how long the drive was also, and it was a really bumpy road. The Klondike was really bumpy.
On day 5, July 13, 2023, we left Minto Resort and drove along the very bumpy Klondike Highway to Dawson City. Sadly, I managed to lose all the dash cam for that drive, so what I show here is a video clip of one of the several segments of road construction along the Klondike Highway that we drove earlier in June. That was a very dry day. But the day we drove with our grandsons, it was a very rainy day, and you can imagine just how muddy those construction zones were. It was a long, slow driving day. In Dawson City, we stayed at the Gold Rush Campground. This is our favorite RV campground in Dawson because the campground itself is located right in Dawson City. That means you can leave your vehicle and walk everywhere around town. It also meant that Brayden and Adrien were able to leave the campground and walk around town by themselves. It was just so much more relaxing for everyone. Going to rehash what happened on Thursday, July 13, specifically our highlights and lowlights.
So the highlight for today, probably the Minto Resort and how nice the people were and how nice the actual resort actually was. And the low light was probably getting to Dawson City and how the highway was very bumpy and muddy.
We're just going to review the journey on Thursday, July 13, and Adrien's going to trace out our itinerary.
So first things first, we came from Minto Landing up here to Stewart Crossing to get some gas. Then after that, we went and continued down the highway to Dempster Junction, which we got a snack and used the washroom. Then we went to Dawson City, and that's where we are now.
On day 6, July 14, 2023, we spent the day in Dawson City to stock up before our trip to Tuktoyaktuk and the Arctic Ocean. This gave Brayden and Adrien a chance to look around Dawson City. It was also the 25th anniversary of self-government for the Tuktoyaktuk First Nation, so we were able to take in some of the celebrations, such as this storytelling session. We also took the George Black Ferry across the Yukon River to give the boys an opportunity to experience a ferry ride. At dinner that evening, we discussed our big drive starting the next day, north along the infamous Dempster Highway to the Arctic Circle, then Fort McPherson and Inuvik in Northwest Territories, culminating with a stay in Tuktoyaktuk on the shore of the Arctic Ocean. We were rushing a bit to ensure that Brayden and Adrien were able to experience the 24 hours of sunlight, also known as the midnight sun, north of the Arctic Circle. So that's a wrap that winds up Brayden and Adrien's first week in Yukon. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. Stay well and join us in the next video when we leave Dawson City, Yukon and start our trip north along the Dempster Highway in all its glory but in the worst road condition we have seen it in our last 5 previous trips. Cheers!